The sheriff of the small town of Castle Rock, Alan Pangborn, continues to search for the missing boy, Henri Deaver, all on his own. The cop arrives in the woods on the outskirts of town to inspect the place where the child was last seen, but there are no signs of Henri there. Sitting down to rest for a moment, the sheriff gazes at the empty frozen lake. Suddenly, a strange sound erupts, and when it fades, Henri Deaver, alive and well, appears in the middle of the frozen lake. 27 years have passed. Castle Rock continues to live its quiet life. Dale Lacey, the warden of the famous Shawshank prison, is preparing to retire after 30 years of service. On his last day of work, the old man prepares breakfast for his blind wife, kisses her goodbye, and leaves. But Lacey doesn't show up at the prison. Instead, he drives to a forest lake, ties one end of a rope around his neck, and attaches it to a tree, and without hesitation, steps on the gas pedal. The car, along with its owner, plummets off the cliff. Teresa Porter, the deputy warden replacing the late Dale Lacey, arrives at Shawshank. She familiarizes herself with her new workplace and learns the prison's history. All previous wardens have met strange ends and none live to old age, but Teresa is more concerned with something else. Shawshank has long been overcrowded and prisoners are being housed even in the gym. Officer Zalewski tells Teresa Porter about Block F. It was closed after the fire in '87, but if it's cleaned up, the block could house several dozen inmates. For his initiative, Zalewski is tasked with being the first to enter the abandoned block, check its condition, and count the beds. The guard cuts the rusty lock and inspects the wing, which according to official records, hasn't been entered in about 30 years. But suddenly the officer notices fresh footprints from men's boots in the thick layer of dust. Zalewski follows the tracks, which lead him to an iron door to a maintenance section. The tracks take the officer to a hatch. With difficulty, he opens the old bolts and looks inside. Zalewski's wallet falls out of his pocket, and he has to climb down to retrieve it. At the bottom of the well, the guard finds a chair, a book, and a can of cigarette butts. This looks very suspicious, but Zalewski doesn't have time to think about it. From the dark corner, a man locked in a cage stares at him, and the frightened guard hurries to get out of the well. An emergency inspection begins in Shawshank, but all prisoners are accounted for. No one can understand how an unregistered inmate ended up in the prison. The boy from the dungeon is brought to the interrogation room, but he doesn't respond to the officer's questions or react to anyone around him. Zalewski takes the prisoner to the shower, then returns to the basement to collect evidence. The main piece of evidence is the can of cigarette butts. It is sent to Teresa Porter's office, and after comparing them with the butts of her predecessor, she realizes that it was Lacey who held the boy captive. There is no information about the prisoner in any official archives or in Dale Lacey's personal records. There are no fingerprints or data about missing persons matching him. Teresa Porter worries that the incident could harm Shawshank Prison and ruin her career. She orders everyone to keep quiet about the terrible discovery for now to avoid attracting unwanted attention. This situation scares Zalewski. He knows well that horrible things happen in the prison, and he suspects that the boy might simply be disposed of. Teresa personally interrogates the mysterious prisoner, and for the first time in a long while, he speaks. The boy says the name Henri Deaver, but the local guards know for sure that this isn't the prisoner's name. It belonged to a completely different person who once lived in Castle Rock. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Henri Deaver stands before the court, defending a woman sentenced to the death penalty. After leaving Castle Rock, he became a successful lawyer specializing in such cases. At this trial, the lawyer fails to win, and he visits his client one last time. Listening to her final words, Henri remembers the day Sheriff Alan Pangborn found him. Everything before that moment has been erased from Henri's memory. Teresa studies Henri Deaver's file and reaffirms her decision not to involve the lawyer in the convoluted story. Her deputy supports the decision and suggests placing the mysterious prisoner with a dangerous criminal to quickly close the matter. Officer Zalewski overhears the conversation between the leaders. He anonymously calls Henri Deaver and tells him about the boy locked in a cage, who speaks his name. Zalewski warns Henri that if he doesn't come, the prisoner will face a grim end soon. A few days later, Henri arrives in Castle Rock. Despite his long absence, people recognize him on the streets and still blame him for his father's death. The familiar streets trigger Henri's memories of the day Sheriff Alan Pangborn found him on the lake. Everything before that remains a blank for Henri, including where he was during his disappearance. Henri's adoptive mother, Ruth, doesn't immediately recognize him. Due to her illness, she suffers from memory lapses. However, her new boyfriend, Sheriff Allen, instantly knows who stands before him. All this time, the kid, the mysterious prisoner, sits alone in his cell. Noticing a mouse nearby, he forces it, with the power of his mind, to approach the mousetrap. Henri heads straight to the prison. Teresa invites him into her office and claims that no boy was found in the dungeon. She assures the lawyer that the phone call was someone's bad prank and that he can safely return to Chicago. But Henry knows this is a lie, and on his way out, he locks eyes with Zalewski. The men recognize each other but don't show it. Night falls. Officer Zalewski takes his place at the monitors. Suddenly, he notices that the new prisoner's cell is empty and he doesn't appear on any of the other camera feeds. The kid reappears a second later, but now on the cameras in the corridor. He looks directly through the lens at the guard, and behind the prisoner, Zalewski sees the bodies of his colleagues. Zalewski sounds the alarm and leaves the office to stop the criminal. But in the corridor, it turns out all the guard's colleagues are alive. The scene on the monitors was just a vision, and the kid never left his cell. To get the full picture, we need to go back a bit in time. From its very founding, Castle Rock was a strange town, and there were always events that made the residents shudder. In the end, there wasn't a single house left in town where something frightening hadn't happened. Trying to find out the details of the strange case, Henri Deaver visits the home of the former prison warden. He doesn't tell the blind woman his name, and she gladly agrees to help the lawyer, showing him into her husband's office. But as soon as her neighbor tells the woman over the phone who entered her house, the widow asks Henry to leave and not insult her with his presence. Zalewski visits the silent boy to collect the untouched food tray. The officer tries to find out why he had the vision, but the kid continues to remain silent. News of Dale Lacey's mysterious prisoner reaches the sheriff. He finds Teresa in a bar and tells her about a strange incident that happened to him 30 years ago. Back then, during a night shift, he stopped Dale Lacey's car, and the warden told him that he had found the devil himself. Lacey locked the devil in a cage, and from that moment on, the horrors in Castle Rock finally stopped. But if Teresa releases the boy, the town will once again descend into darkness. After the conversation with the sheriff, Teresa and her deputy descend into the well. She tries to understand why the kind and honorable Lacey kept the young boy captive and how she should solve this problem now. Teresa's deputy comes for the kid. They place him in a cell with the most dangerous prisoner, hoping the criminal will rid the prison of the unwanted guest. At first, everything goes according to plan. The prisoner is irritated by the silent neighbor and looks for a reason to start a fight. But the kid doesn't react to the provocations. He only asks the giant not to touch him, assuring him that it would be for the best. Henry spends the evening in a bar. Zalewski's group also arrives there, and the lawyer secretly passes the officer a note asking him to call. That night, the men manage to meet, and Zalewski informs the lawyer that he hasn't known the prisoner's whereabouts for 2 days. Henry becomes furious and promises to involve the district attorney, but the guard refuses to act as a witness, fearing for his job. This scares Henri Deaver. He begins to suspect that the boy might have invented the story about the imprisoned victim. Relying only on himself, Henry finds a way to get into Shawshank. He arrives with a church mission, posing as a Bible reader. At the same time as the group's visit, the guards discover the body of the dangerous prisoner with no visible wounds. The medical examiner reports to the prison warden that the man died from a serious illness, but she is puzzled by how they hadn't noticed it earlier. With such injuries, he wouldn't have been able to get out of bed. Henry has no choice but to accept that his visit to the prison once again yielded no results. But Zalewski manages to prove to the lawyer that the story of the prisoner is true. He releases the kid outside for a few seconds. Henry gives the prisoner brief instructions and takes a photo, allowing him access to the prisoner. During lunch, the kid breaks the prison rules. He stands up and walks toward the opposite wall. Zalewski steps forward to subdue the prisoner and return him to his seat. While no one else can hear, he passes the boy a message from the lawyer, asking him to just wait a little longer while Henry deals with the prison authorities. Zalewski tells Henri Deaver what happened during their next secret meeting. The lawyer asks the guard to get closer to the prisoner to learn more about him. In return, he promises to help Zalewski get into law school. While trying to get information from the police on the Dale Lacey case, Henry learns that his childhood friend Molly has been detained. The lawyer posts bail, helping the girl get released in time to appear on a TV show. Using her ability to read minds, Molly learns everything her friend is thinking about during the ride. In gratitude for his help, she reveals the truth about the Shawshank prisoner live on a popular show, shocking the audience. After the revelation, Teresa Porter herself contacts Henry and asks him to come. The warden hands the lawyer a thin folder with scant information she managed to gather on the kid and offers a compromise. Shawshank will pay the prisoner $300,000 and he will drop any claims. Officially, they'll call it a mistaken arrest. Henry tells his client about Teresa's offer during their first meeting. He insists that they should refuse the money and prove that this was no accident but a real kidnapping. But none of this concerns the kid. He asks the lawyer strange questions directly related to Henri Deaver's disappearance and the death of his father 30 years ago. Zalewski continues his work, but the tension in Shawshank grows heavier for him by the day. The guard is outraged by the behavior of his colleagues and their mistreatment of all the prisoners. The kid is also surprised. Teresa Porter's deputy tries to intimidate the boy, hoping to get the truth about his past and how he ended up in captivity. But this time, the prisoner does not stay silent. He delivers a strange speech about the word of God, which deeply unsettles the warden. That evening, Zalewski finds Henri in a bar. Ignoring the rules, he approaches the lawyer in front of everyone and asks him to step outside for a talk. The young man hands Henri Deaver a drawing of the cage and begs him to intervene in Shawshank's affairs. The chaos in the prison has gone too far. He agrees to testify and expose all the violations. Zalewski's condition worsens by the day. He stops talking to his colleagues and, during secret visits to the kid, promises that soon they will both escape this cursed place. Henri begins to suspect that the mystery of his client is somehow tied to what happened 30 years ago. In the district archives, the lawyer finds articles and notes about his disappearance, but no further details have emerged since then, and the official records have been lost. The only thing he manages to find is the address of one of the suspects in his kidnapping, whose involvement was never proven. Henri travels to the man's forest home to meet the witness in person. The old man doesn't immediately recognize his visitor, but when Henri states his name, the old man gives him a folder stolen from the archives. He is glad to see the boy in his house and hopes that Henri remembers what happened and can confirm his innocence. Henri tells Alan about the conversation with the old man, but the sheriff asks him to stop searching for the truth. He admits that, in his final moments, Deaver Sr. spoke the name of the person who pushed him off the cliff, and that person was Henri himself. Henri regrets returning to Castle Rock, and he tells Zalewski that he's dropping the case and heading back to Chicago. This news finally drives the guard mad. He takes out his service pistol and kills all the colleagues who had been driving him crazy. At the same time, Henri is near Teresa's office. He tries to stop the guard, and Zalewski declares that he wants to testify. But by order of the prison warden, the crazed guard is taken out, ensuring the truth never leaves Shawshank's walls. Before leaving, Henri sets up a surveillance system in his mother's house to keep the sick woman safe. He downloads the app onto Alan's phone and asks him to watch over the woman while he is away. But Henri has to change his plans. He is informed that his client has been released, but has no home or family. The lawyer is forced to meet the kid and figure out what to do with him next. First, he takes the prisoner to a doctor, but after running tests, the clinic refuses to admit the patient, as no serious problems are detected. Molly agrees to help her friend. She invites the kid to stay in her studio until Henri can sort things out. The pair lock the young man inside and promise that he is now completely safe and no one will find him. But it wasn't him they needed to worry about. At night, the kid leaves his hiding place to walk around nighttime Castle Rock. He is drawn to an ordinary house where a child's birthday party is in full swing. As soon as the boy is near the family, the mood changes. The celebration turns into a tragedy, and instead of children's songs, screams and cries come from the house. The next day, when Molly's friend, Jackie Torrance, visits the studio, the kid has already returned to his place. Meanwhile, Henri and his family head to a bridge, which is being dedicated to Sheriff Alan Pangborn. But the event is marred by another incident. Ruth loses her grip on reality and, in front of everyone, jumps into the water. Not realizing who's in front of her, Jackie Torrance chatters endlessly with her new companion. But within an hour, she calls Molly, begging for help. The strange man has climbed onto the roof and won't respond to her request to come down. Molly climbs up to the boy, but something feels wrong. Instead of thoughts in his head, she hears the cries of millions of people who have lived in Castle Rock throughout history. The girl rushes to Henri to tell him everything. The lawyer thinks it's all nonsense, but he has no choice but to let the kid in and find him a different place to stay. Henri takes the guests to his father's garage and offers to stay there for the time being. But the young man's behavior scares Henri once again. The kid plays the same melody on the piano that Henri's father used to play. Alan returns to the bridge. The sheriff blames himself for what happened to Ruth and wants to take down the plaque with his name. At that moment, his phone buzzes in his pocket, and the old man sees a notification that someone is in the house. The sheriff rushes home, and in the yard, he encounters the nighttime visitor. It's the same boy Dale Lacey drove in his car 30 years ago, calling him the devil. The boy hasn't aged a day. Alan raises his gun to finish what the former warden started, but the kid asks the old man not to act rashly. He promises to save Ruth and restore her sanity. While Henri is reburying his father, the kid rummages through a suitcase of the deceased's belongings. He finds an old video camera and tapes, which contain recordings of Deaver Sr.'s walks with his son. He then meets with Alan and instructs him to find the car in which Dale Lacey brought him to the prison 30 years ago. The old man tells the boy that the car has long been at the junkyard, but the kid doesn't see a problem and demands that Alan find a way to get it back. In the house, the kid acts like he owns the place. He puts on Deaver's suit and turns on his music player. When Ruth returns home and sees the stranger, she feels ill. The woman insists to her son that the suit shouldn't be here. Her husband was buried in it. Sensing that things are going too far, Henri decides to get rid of the visitor. He takes him to a psychiatric clinic and leaves him in the hands of the caring staff. But the very next day, the kid returns to the Deaver home. Alan finds his old friend's car and convinces the driver to give him the wrecked vehicle. With this news, he returns to the kid, but the young man appears on the doorstep with a serious injury, and it seems he no longer has any desire to save Ruth. The old man rushes into the house to find the woman and learn what happened to her. He sees scattered belongings and red stains, but Ruth is nowhere to be found. At that moment, Ruth is hiding in the barn, quietly loading her gun. Her nerves are stretched to the limit. When the kid returned to the house, Ruth thought she saw her late husband in him. A news report about a fire at the psychiatric clinic snapped the woman back to reality, and she realized that the guest posed a serious danger to her family. She found the gun in her husband's secret stash, but the clip was empty. The strange boy was far scarier than Ruth could have imagined. He not only wore Deaver Sr. a suit, but he began to act like the deceased man. The kid knew everything that only the head of the family could have known. He invited Ruth to dance and answered all her questions, proving that he wasn't in the house for the first time. Ruth tried her best to play along with the stranger, but he noticed her anxiety and offered her a sedative. But the woman managed to deceive the kid and escape from him to find ammunition and protect herself. Finally, her memory helped Ruth locate the secret stash. She hides in the barn, loads the gun, and waits with bated breath. When the footsteps sound dangerously close, she pulls the trigger and hears the body hit the floor. But when she manages to take a look, it's not the strange stranger lying there. Alan's body lies on the floor before her. New residents move to Castle Rock. A couple buys Dale Lacey's house and plans to open a hotel there. In the basement, they discover hundreds of paintings that the former owner painted, and on every canvas, the young couple sees the same face, the face of the kid. All the paintings find their place on the walls of the house, and the couple returns to setting up the hotel. Fortune smiles upon them. The first guests arrive that very day, promising success for the hotel. But the owner of the house, Gordon, decides to celebrate this event in a strange way. He brutally murders the guests. Returning home, Henri once again finds the kid there. The guest leads the lawyer and shows him Alan's body, still lying on the floor in the barn. The kid tells Henri that he has waited for him for 27 years, and now they must go into the woods. But the arriving cops seem to have other plans, and the strange boy flees, leaving Henri to deal with the problems alone. That night, Henri decides to break into Dale Lacey's house to finally find information about his mysterious prisoner. The man enters through the basement and goes upstairs to the living room, which is covered in portraits of the mysterious boy. The sight seems very strange to Henri, but one painting particularly catches his attention. In it, the lawyer sees the kid in the same pose and clothes in which Henri himself was depicted on the flyer during his disappearance. The owners of the house discover the intruder in their gallery and, out of habit, try to get rid of him. But Henri manages to escape outside, where Jackie Torrance comes to his rescue. Like her famous uncle, the girl is excellent with an axe. Unaware of what is happening to her friends, Molly returns home. On the stairs, she finds the kid, and he tells her that only she can help him because she knows him well. Molly doesn't understand what he's talking about, but she follows the guest upstairs and agrees to listen to him. The kid describes the girl's room and all of her childhood in detail. He doesn't hide how he knows all of this. The boy insists to his friend that he was there when her life ended. In another reality, the kid, who is also Henri Deaver, stands before investors, presenting his innovative drug for Alzheimer's, which he created to cure his mother. The young man receives the unfortunate news. Something terrible has happened to his father, and Henri must return to Castle Rock. The town and the Deaver house are no different from the ones the current Henri Deaver returned to, but this Henri's life has many differences. In this world, Molly is also Henri's best friend, and the pair spend an evening at a bar. The boy talks about how his mother now lives with former Sheriff Alan Pangborn, whom she left Deaver Sr. for many years ago. At night, the power goes out in the house, and Henri has to go down to the basement to find the breaker. But along with the electrical panel, he finds something else. A cage with a locked-up teenager, the missing Henri Deaver. The police and social services arrive at the scene. The boy is examined, but he says nothing except for the name of the young homeowner. Among his father's tapes, Henri finds one with explanations. Deaver Sr. tells how a teenage boy appeared on his doorstep, claiming the man was his adoptive father and his name was Henri Deaver. The man decided that the devil had sent the boy in response to his prayers to return the son that Ruth had taken away. And to protect the town from evil, Deaver Sr. locked the teenager in a cage and kept him there for many years until he died. Henri plays the tape for Molly, but the girl is sure it's all a product of the old man's sick imagination. The pair decide to visit the boy and try to learn his version of events, but a fire breaks out at the shelter and the teenager is moved to the station. Molly and Henri meet with the boy, but he continues to act strangely. He insists that his name is Henri Deaver and that they urgently need to go to the woods because there is little time left. The police agree to release the boy to Molly, but they assign Officer Zalewski to escort them. However, Molly manages to escape from the convoy, darting in front of a train to take the boy to the woods and uncover the truth about his appearance. The teenager runs deeper into the forest without offering any explanation. Henri and Molly chase after him, but the boy suddenly stops as if he is caught between two worlds. Molly manages to read his thoughts and see what young Henri is seeing, but while she is witnessing the events, Officer Zalewski appears behind them. The boy runs further into the woods. Molly, Zalewski, and Henri Deaver try to catch up to him, but at that moment the officer's gun accidentally fires and Molly falls to the ground. Closing her eyes, Molly asks her friend to help the teenager return. Something strange happens again. Henri sees people from different eras who ended their lives in this forest. Suddenly everything disappears, and he finds himself alone in the same spot, but now in the midst of a snowy winter. He runs to the cliff to get a better view and sees Sheriff Alan Pangborn finding the boy and calling him Henri Deaver. The kid finishes his story. He admits that for several days in a row, he tried to find a way back to his world, but he failed. Dale Lacey found him in the woods, and the boy spent the next 30 years in the Shawshank basement. Locking him in the cage, Dale Lacey spent 30 years waiting for directions from higher powers. At one point, he even tried to end the boy's suffering, but he didn't have the courage to go through with it. Now the kid asks Molly for help. He says they need to convince Henri to go into the woods and find the passage between the worlds to restore everything to its original state. Molly relays the conversation to her friend the next day. Meanwhile, the kid goes to the town cemetery to Deaver Sr.'s grave. Henri promises Molly they will discuss the story about the woods later, and he heads to the station to get his son. But the police detain the lawyer due to the incident at the hotel. Teresa Porter, the warden, arrives at Molly's studio. She gives the girl a figurine that appeared in her house, which served as a warning from the mysterious prisoner. Teresa is not mistaken. As soon as she steps away from the door, she is hit by a prison bus. Following Molly's lead, the police find the kid and take him to the station as well. But the boy does not plan to stay there long. First, he manipulates the situation so that he and Henri are locked in the same cell, and later he incites the prisoners to riot and eliminate all the guards. The two men walk through the empty department where no staff members are left alive. The kid asks Henri to come with him to the woods, but when they can't reach an agreement, he raises a gun, forcing the lawyer to comply. The kid and his captive arrive at a familiar place, and Henri remembers the day he pushed his father off the cliff. He did it on purpose, to protect himself and his mother from the mad tyrant. While the kid is distracted for a split second, Henri attacks and takes the gun from him. For the first time since they met, the boy's sweet face distorts into a terrifying grimace, and Henri realizes that Dale Lacey was right. Standing before him is the real devil. A year later, Henri Deaver returns to his usual life, but now he no longer defends the condemned. Instead, he deals with land issues. He remains in Castle Rock, living in his parents' house, visiting his mother's and Alan's graves, and one other secret place. Every evening, Henri sneaks into the abandoned Shawshank prison, descends into the well, and feeds his prisoner. Unlike his predecessor, the lawyer doesn't linger by the cage to listen to the kid's words, because Henri Deaver still isn't sure if he's doing the right thing. 400 years before. In a forested area, a group of French settlers tries to establish a village, but it's not easy. The residents are dying of hunger and hope is fading. The leader's daughter, Amity, tries to incite a rebellion, but for this, she and her fiancé, Marston, are exiled from the settlement. The couple wanders through the woods, seemingly doomed to die, but a mysterious sound makes Amity rise and follow it. Standing at the edge of a cliff, the girl sees an angel who shows her a new path. Amity returns to the settlement to tell everyone about her encounter with the angel. As proof of her words, a miracle occurs. On previously barren land, crops appear that can feed an entire city. The residents surround Amity, thanking her for saving their lives, and she becomes a saint in their eyes. The elder tries to stop the chaos, convinced that witchcraft is involved, but the starving people no longer listen to him, choosing a new prophet. Human recognition isn't enough for Amity. She sacrifices everyone who was responsible for her exile. After this, she tells the people that she will be the voice of the angel, and they must spread his word forever. The girl wasn't lying. Every day, she waited for new instructions from the angel to know what to do next. But the sacrifice the angel demanded was too cruel. Noticing that Amity doubted his power, the angel sent his servants to her. A swarm of moths emerged from a wooden statue and took residence in the villagers. This erased any doubts the people had, and Amity declared that the angel had entrusted them with an important mission to sleep until the time came and rise to conquer the world. From that moment on, work in the settlement intensified, and when everything was ready, the congregation descended into an underground tunnel to fulfill the angel's will. Amity personally took the lives of each villager, carefully laying their bodies in wooden boxes. She assured the people that in 400 years, the angel would bring them back to life, and they would enslave the world, gaining limitless power. When only Amity and Marston were left alive, the prophet reminded her fiancé of the rules 400 years later. He would be resurrected first, and he would have to awaken the others. But before that, the man would need to find new vessels, bodies into which the souls of the deceased villagers could be transferred. And most importantly, he would have to find the angel who would lead them. A grand parade is held through the streets of Castle Rock, celebrating the 400th anniversary of the town. The local pastor takes the stage and presents the main gift to the residents, a statue of the angel. As soon as the veil is lifted from the sculpture, the crowd falls silent. The gaze of the wooden statue puts them in a trance, just as Amity fell into a trance 400 years ago when the angel removed his hood, revealing his face. Who would have thought that under the hood would be the kid, the prisoner from Shawshank? The people follow the statue through the entire town, noticing nothing around them. Ace Merrill, a vessel for Marston's soul, kneels by Amity's grave, promising her a swift awakening. He has already found a body she can occupy after her return. The body for the prophet will be Joy, a teenage girl. She joins the procession, walking with everyone behind the angel statue to complete the ritual. The girl is prepared for the ceremony, after which Amity's soul will live in her body. Marston gathers the congregation and reminds them that after the prophet's resurrection, they will have unlimited power over the world. The zombie-like townspeople also keep their eyes fixed on the statue while the resurrected prepare the altar, eager for their leader's awakening. A small group, unaffected by the statue's magical power, tries to prevent the catastrophe. After studying the underground tunnel layout, they plan to disrupt the ceremony by blowing everything up. But the angel's already on the doorstep of Castle Rock, waiting for his servants to seize the town and unleash evil. The saboteurs set off the explosives, and the town trembles. After the second blast, the angel statue falls into the ground and shatters into pieces. The crowd snaps out of the trance, trying to figure out how they ended up in this strange place. Panic ensues. Taking advantage of the chaos, Joy uses the ritual blade. She eliminates Marston and rushes away from the strange house. The angel watches from the cliff as his plans crumble. Resigned to another defeat, the kid vanishes into thin air. Fresh notices are posted around town, announcing that Henri Deaver has gone missing again.